Told over the course of 8 episodes, Netflix's Shadow and Bone feels like a homecoming for those of us who never grew out of reading young adult fantasy. Though there are some hiccups with weaving together its 2 primary stories, the series captures the novel's ability to balance large-scale world-building with theatrical action sequences, sweeping romances, and elements of horror.
You're safe now. Tell me what happened in the fold.
The show adapts Leigh Bardugo's best-selling book of the same name, while writing new material to incorporate the wonderfully acidic characters of the follow-up story, Six of Crows. It takes place in war-torn Ravka, a fictionalized Russia where the magical class of Grisha are persecuted following the creation of a hostile regent called the Fold. Alina Starkov, played by Jessie Mei Li, ascends from army cartographer to sun-summoning Grisha and is separated from her old life, including best friend and gifted tracker, Malyen Oretsev. Unlike the books, both are cast as mixed-race characters, and that decision lets the show replace a lot of the political exposition of the books by showing how hostile Ravka can be to foreigners. Meanwhile, in the seedy underbelly of a fictionalized Amsterdam called Ketterdam, where teens run civil crime factions, a crew assembles in a fun Ocean's 11-style heist. While Shadow and Bone fits well with Netflix's other fantasy adaptations like The Witcher and Umbrella Academy, it's even better contextualized by the recent wave of horror-tinged teen dramas like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and Fate the Winx Saga. Unlike these comparable stories, the books Netflix Shadow and Bones are based on are already dark in tone, and that is a huge part of the appeal. The Fold is grand and inky black, and the show captures the dread of crossing via ship as passengers attempt to fend off monsters who live there. And rather than portraying the more archetypal, nurturing, but secretive Hogwarts-style magical school, the Little Palace is a punishing and socially stratified place where Grisha not only train, but are also sequestered for their own protection. Bardugo's reimagining of typical fantasy lore is lovely to watch. Grisha don't practice magic, instead they call it the small science. They are split into 3 orders: Caporalki, Etherealki, and Materialki, with subclasses under each, like Inferni, who manipulate fire, or the Heartrenders and Healers, who manipulate the human body. Netflix hits these notes well with scenes of Grisha in the Little Palace playing with fire or tailoring faces, which is a process of augmenting your appearance. The show's heist scenes also shake up the classic young adult Chosen One story. Big budget, early aughts fantasy films created a kind of formula. A teen learns they're supernaturally powerful, goes through magical training, and is part of at least one love triangle before saving the world. Ketterdam refreshes this with a western-tinged edge, smoke-filled gambling dens, dark alleys, corporate goons in lavish mansions, and a gunfight is never far off. In Shadow and Bone, we're rooting for both Alina and her underdog kidnappers. Rather than delve into the plot of the Six of Crows books, which takes place years later, the adaptation writes in new material for what those characters were doing during the events of Shadow and Bone. This makes space for new scenes and plot lines, some of which, like a trip across the Fold in a rickety train, are season highlights that offer valuable comic relief. Jesper particularly shines with his alchemy of charisma and sharpshooting, making him equally fun to watch whether he's shooting holes through coins or charming a stable boy. But the 2 stories don't always sit easily together. There are quite a few plot lines to balance, which isn't unheard of for fantasy stories, but it does mean this one season has to run through quite a bit of character introduction in order to tie it all together. The Six of Crows plot lines also don't get the same scale of action sequences, mostly focusing on world building and laying groundwork for fan favorites Kaz, Inej, and Jesper. Though there are still enough fun come-up-in scenes that fans will likely enjoy. It raises the question of how Netflix will choose to balance the 2 storylines in the following seasons, and what big action moments the heist crew has in store.
The prize is 1 million Kruger.
Hopefully we can look forward to moments in the book we've already imagined on our mind's eye, like seeing Inej in her full acrobatic knife-wielding glory.
Good girl. Now the work begins.
Netflix maintains its great track record of adapting fantasy action books to screen with Shadow and Bone, a fun action-packed series based on Leigh Bardugo's best-selling Grishaverse books. The first season manages to capture much of the darker magic of young adult fantasy while being unafraid to make smart changes to certain characters' origin stories and even the sequence of events, even if the storylines from the 2 series of books don't always easily mesh. For more on Netflix, be sure to check out everything coming to the streaming service in April, our Q&A with the cast of Shadow and Bone, and the action-packed trailer for Yasuke. And for everything else, keep it locked right here on IGN.